What's up guys, Julian here, and if you're wondering what you're watching, it's because this is the first episode of a new cooking series. The inspiration for this series stems from my mother's cooking. It was always truly amazing, and it still is, as I'm sure most of your mother's cooking is as well. It also stems from me realizing that cooking is not all that hard of a practice, and with a little bit of effort, you can make an amazing meal and have fun with it too. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of recipes. I believe that cooking at home should be about how you want to make the meal, and you shouldn't have to worry about how someone else made it. That being said, this series is more of a guideline of the meals that we're going to cook, and you're to expand upon it in whatever way you see fit. Of course, that being said, I will include a recipe for all you naysayers that believe you need a recipe to cook. Of course, I encourage you to make it your own. Today's meal will be a roasted chicken with mashed potatoes, and a nice simple salad to go with it. I believe that this is the quintessential meal that all home chefs should know how to make. Not only is it delicious, but it has many other uses beyond that one meal. And in every episode, like with this one, I will be teaching you how to pair your meal with a drink. And yes, it will be an alcoholic drink, so sorry for all you viewers who are under 21. Now let's start cooking at home, just like Mom. Now, in order to cook a roast chicken, you're going to need a couple things. You're going to need an oven, which we'll be setting to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. You're going to need a roasting pan for your chicken. You can go disposable, but just make sure you can fit your chicken inside along with all the other ingredients. Of course, you're going to need a chicken, preferably less than 4 pounds, because depending on how large your bird is, it may cook unevenly. Although you may have a tough time finding one nowadays that is less than 4 pounds. So just try not to go over 5 pounds. No chicken should weigh that much. You're also going to want 4 to 5 cloves of garlic. I personally love garlic, and I add it to almost everything that I cook. I think that most people are afraid of it because it makes your breath stink. But it is essential for roasting a chicken. You're going to want 1 to 2 onions, depending on how large your onions are. Try not to go red, as it may overpower your chicken. However, if you like red onions, who am I to stop you? You're going to need 3 to 5 sprigs of fresh rosemary. Please, for the love of God, do not forget the rosemary. It will really add a much needed flavor to your chicken. Dried will not give you the same effect, but I will allow it. Not everyone lives in a place where you can get fresh herbs. Keep in mind, however, you will have to use more of the dried herbs than the fresh herbs. You're going to want 3 to 5 sprigs of thyme. This is definitely a very important herb, so do not overlook it. The same rules also apply for dried thyme. You're also going to want a few carrots. It's always nice to include some sort of root vegetable when roasting meat. Carrots happen to be the most common in our diets, but don't be afraid to branch out. You're also going to want a couple stalks of celery. This will add a nice variety in the vegetables that will be incorporated into our meal. You're also going to want a bottle of dry vermouth. This is what is used in martinis, but it also doubles as an excellent cooking wine. It will provide some much needed liquid in our roasting pan, but we will not worry about that until later. You're also going to need some butter, preferably unsalted. This is going to add some delicious buttery flavor to our chicken, as well as serve as a way of crisping up the skin on the chicken when it's roasting in the oven. Now that we've assembled all the necessary ingredients, let's start prepping everything. Now, I like to keep a garbage bag pretty close to my cutting board because that will help me get rid of anything like the carrot skin or the onion skin without having to go out of my way every single time to the garbage pail. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to cut up these carrots real quick. I like to cut off the tips and obviously the end, and as you can see, goes in the trash just like that. Obviously, we're going to have to peel these carrots, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now I like to cut the carrots in half lengthwise, as such, and then cut them into larger chunks, like this big. And then we're just gonna go ahead and toss it in our roasting pan, which I have right here, like such, and we'll keep that there for later. I like to cut these in half and into larger chunks because it cuts down on cutting time, and it also adds more surface area to the carrots for them to absorb nice liquids, such as the liquid that is going to be in this pan later. The same also goes for the celery. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the ends of the celery like that, and then I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise, and then I'm going to cut larger chunks, but you can certainly feel free to cut smaller chunks of celery if you see fit. Now for the onions, I like to start off by cutting off the ends, and then, well, you can toss them away, and then I'm going to go ahead and quarter the onion. That'll help get rid of the skin a little easier. And if you find that an onion skin is too hard to take off just with your nails or something, you can go ahead and just take off an entire layer of that onion. It just makes things a lot faster and you're not really losing much of the onion. So I'm going to then cut these onion quarters into slices like this. Now also a general rule, when you're moving things with your knife across the cutting board, try not to use the sharp side of the blade, as that will dull your blade. You want to flip your knife over and then push with the push aside with the dull side of the knife. So you want to get rid of any loose skin as such. So next up comes our garlic. I like to cut off the ends of the garlic first, and then sort of push down with the knife and peel up the garlic. And then sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll get the entire skin off, like this one. So next, what we're going to do with the garlic is we're going to smash it. That is, we're going to take the flat side of the blade and we're going to put it over the garlic, and we're just going to give it a nice hit. So that gives you a nice smash, and you can see that it's sort of smashed up, obviously. So that's good for us. We're going to, you can also use this as a way to de-skin the garlic, because you can see the skin just comes right off. So we're going to go ahead and do that so we get smaller chunks of garlic, which is what we really want. We can just cut this one in half. It's rather large, but that's not a bad thing. Of course, we'd rather have more garlic than less garlic for our roast chicken. So now that everything's been chopped up, I've put everything in the pan, including the chicken, because now we need to prep the chicken. You're going to need to use your knife for this, as we're going to need to get under the skin of the chicken, so right here. So we're going to go ahead and use the knife and make a small incision just where the skin starts to separate from the chicken breast. So as you can see, I'm using the knife to separate the skin from the chicken breast. You want to just loosen it up a little bit. You can go as far as like half the blade, just like that. You're going to want to spread it around also, so get a little wider bit there. And you're also going to want to do the same to the other side. This is going to allow us to add garlic and rosemary and thyme into under the skin, and this will allow to infuse the flavors of the rosemary and thyme and the garlic into the chicken meat, as well as protect them from becoming burned inside of the oven, because the oven's getting rather hot. So that's good. So now we're going to take our pieces of garlic and just sort of get it right under the skin, just like that. It's really not that hard. And it really helps and changes the meal so much more if you just do this. It's kind of, it could be a little gross, I suppose, but I mean, once you get over the fact that you're touching raw meat, it's not that big of a deal. So you got to get it all up in there. I know. It's a nice joke to make, but look, you got to have fun with it. You're cooking at home for yourself, and you're going to enjoy it a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of the garlic. You can put any excess garlic or rosemary or thyme into the carcass of the chicken right there. So I'm going to go ahead and take my rosemary sprigs and just, you want to get it really in there. Try not to puncture the skin, but of course, if you do, it's not that big of a deal. Of course, we can't forget our thyme. If you have any extra, like I said, like I do right here, you can just put it into the carcass. No one's going to disagree with you there. And now that this is all ready, we can just want to try to cover as much of the leaves as possible, because they will burn at 375 degrees depending on how long they're in there for. So now that we have our chicken prepped and all of our vegetables cut up, we're going to have to add some liquid to this pan. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the bottle and add some vermouth. Now don't worry about adding too much, as adding more will only add more flavor. It won't get you drunk because it's going to be, all the alcohol will be heated up and evaporated in the oven. And what's left is going to be a nice delicious liquid. I also have a little bit of water in a glass here that I'm going to add to the pan as well. This will add a little more moisture and much needed liquid in the pan for this roasting. Now we can't forget about our butter. We're going to go ahead and add 2 pads of it, so about a ½ inch of slice of butter. We're going to go ahead and add to the top of the chicken. Like I said, this will add some nice buttery flavor to the chicken, and it'll also double as a way to crisp up the skin when it goes into the oven. So now that we have our chicken ready, we can go ahead and put it in the oven. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You want to make sure it's on the middle rack of the oven, although that does depend on your oven. Great, so now that the chicken is in the oven, we can get started on our mashed potatoes. For the mashed potatoes, you will need a pot large enough to cook your potatoes. You're also going to need some potatoes. I'm using Idaho potatoes right now, but that's because I couldn't find Yukon Gold potatoes in my neighborhood. I believe that Yukon Gold potatoes retain moisture better and give you a much more savory mash. But Idaho potatoes will do just fine for now. Don't be afraid to experiment with your ingredients and to find something that you like. Remember, this is your meal, and you can feel free to do what you want with it. Again, you're also going to need some butter. You're going to want about ½ a cup of milk, as this will add some creaminess to your potatoes, and it will also add some moisture. Now you can stop there with your ingredients for your mashed potatoes, but I like to jazz it up with something like cream cheese and garlic. And if you're feeling particularly adventurous, you can add a log of goat cheese to your mashed potatoes to add a nice tangy flavor to complement the otherwise creamy and savory flavor of mashed potatoes. In the oven, we can go ahead and start boiling our potatoes. So let's go ahead and turn on the burner. Now, of course, the cook time of your potatoes depends on how many potatoes you're cooking and for how many people you're cooking for. Now, while the potatoes are cooking, we can quickly make the salad. The purpose of the salad is not only to make sure that you're eating your greens, but also to add something bright and fresh to your plate, because presentation can add all the more enjoyment to your meal. Now, for the salad, you're going to need a bowl. You're going to want a head of butter lettuce. Again, feel free to use your favorite type of lettuce. I'm going to use some baby portobellos for this salad, but you can feel free to put whatever else you want to put in it. I'm also going to use some grape tomatoes. Again, feel free to add whatever it is that you want in your salad. I'm also going to be teaching you how to make a balsamic vinaigrette. So as the name implies, you're going to need some balsamic vinegar. You're also going to want to have some Dijon mustard. And what salad dressing wouldn't be complete without some olive oil? And last but certainly not least, we're going to need a clove of garlic. Yes, we're going to need more garlic. Now first we're going to want to chop up the lettuce. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So then we're going to chop up the mushrooms. This is pretty easy, obviously, but I like to take out the stems first because I think they're a little tough and chewy, but you can feel free to keep them in. And then you're going to go ahead and want to take a couple of your tomatoes, a good handful. This is enough for me. So I'm going to go ahead and throw, well, it's always nice to have more grape tomatoes. So throw them in there. Now for our balsamic vinaigrette, we're going to go ahead and need a zester to zest our garlic. Now, if you don't happen to have come across one of these in your cooking experience, it's totally fine. You can just finely chop your garlic. So I'm going to go ahead and zest our garlic. You're only really going to want to zest about half of the clove, or even a little less than half, because when you zest the garlic, it actually ends up becoming much more potent, so to speak. So there's our zested garlic. We're going to go ahead and put that in the bowl. And then we're going to go ahead and put some Dijon mustard in there. Now, depending on how thick you want your dressing to be, you're going to put, I don't know, I'd say about 1/3 of a fork's full of Dijon mustard. You just put it in the bowl like that. So it's at this point that we're going to go ahead and add our balsamic vinegar. Now I like to add somewhere around 1.5 tablespoons, but obviously it depends on your flavor palette. So you're going to go ahead and start mixing in the mustard and the garlic into the balsamic vinegar. You want to go ahead and get a nice mixture going here. Okay, so now we can go ahead and add our olive oil. So we're going to want to slowly add the olive oil somewhere around, and we're going to want to start to beat the mixture together. So we're going to add somewhere around 1 tablespoon of olive oil, depending on how oily you want your dressing to be. So you may want to tilt the bowl to the side in order to get everything pooling down in one area of the bowl. This will help you to incorporate the olive oil into the dressing. This is what you really want to have happen because obviously oil and water don't mix very well. So you're going to have to beat it a little bit. And this will help to aerate the dressing and help emulsify it. And it'll really become a little thicker and obviously well mixed. So I'd say that's about pretty good. That's nice and thick, and it'll taste really good on our salad. Now it's important to note how long we're going to be cooking this chicken for. Of course, every chicken is going to take a different amount of time due to the different weight of the chicken. A good rule of thumb is that 375 degrees Fahrenheit in the oven, you should be cooking your chicken around 15 to 20 minutes per pound. Of course, the most important part of cooking this meal would be to baste the chicken. you don't want your chicken to dry out. So every 15 to 20 minutes, you're going to go ahead and take a spoon and take the liquid from the bottom of the pan and evenly distribute it thoroughly and generously across the chicken. Simple enough. So let's go ahead and do it. So as you can see here in my pan, I have a considerable amount of liquid. That's because I added enough when I started. If you did not, however, add enough, or your oven is getting a little hot, then it's all right to add more liquid into the pan in the form of either water or vermouth. I would choose vermouth if I were you, but that's just my choice. So now that our potatoes are nice and well done, we can go ahead and turn off the water and drain them. Now I like to put the potatoes right back into the bowl and use that for my mashing. I also like to keep the skin on while mashing, but that has to do with personal preference. I think that the skin adds a nice texture to your mashed potatoes, which would otherwise be a little just too bland. But that's just my opinion. You can obviously skin your potatoes before boiling in water or after you boil them. Just make sure you don't burn your hands because they're rather hot. So now that we have our potatoes drained, we can go ahead and start mashing. I like to go ahead and add the amount of butter that we are going to add in, which is around 1/4 to 1/2 a stick of butter for this many potatoes, just right in there while they're hot, because that will help melt the butter. So I'm going to go ahead and start mashing to incorporate the butter. Now, I was once told by a young Russian man that you should always use warm milk when making mashed potatoes. Since then, I haven't made a mashed potatoes without warm milk. So, we're going to go ahead and microwave this glass of milk that I poured earlier. We're going to go ahead and microwave for about a minute, but that depends on your microwave's power. So let's go ahead and do it. So we're going to go ahead and pour in this milk a little bit at a time and not to use too much, because then your potatoes will end up being a little watery. So it's at this time that I'm going to go ahead and add some cream cheese to the mix. This will add a nice creamy tang to the mashed potatoes that would otherwise be unattainable. Now I also chopped up another clove of garlic because I love it, and I'm going to go ahead and add that to the potato right now. Now I don't normally cook with salt, but potatoes most definitely need some salt, so I will allow it this once. Of course, you can feel free to add salt to anything that you make. Just beware that it is not the healthiest ingredient. So I'm going to go ahead and add about a handful of salt to these potatoes. And you can feel free to add whatever else you want in your mashed potatoes. So it's been about an hour and 20 minutes, so let's go ahead and take out the chicken from the oven and put it on the table to rest. Now, it may be tempting to attack this chicken right now and tear it apart because you've been cooking for nearly an hour. But you have to stop yourself right there, because cutting into this chicken, and any meat for that matter, right after it's done cooking will ruin the meat. Now you have to let the meat rest for at least 5 minutes. I usually let it rest for 10 minutes. Now this is because the juices inside that are heated up right now will also cool down with the meat, and this will allow for them to reincorporate themselves back into the meat so they don't pour out as soon as you cut into the meat. This is what you really want. I'd love to use this time to tell you how to pair a drink with this meal. Now, when thinking about your meal, you want to think about all the flavors incorporated into your meal and what may or may not complement it well. Now, when I think of roast chicken, I think of a savory meal, but something a little less intense and lighter in flavor than, say, a steak. So when thinking of something to pair with your roasted chicken, you may want to think of something that won't overpower it and something that will be a little lighter in flavor and will complement your chicken very well. Today, one of my suggestions is a glass of Chardonnay. This particular Chardonnay from Kendall Jackson is aged in oak barrels. This adds a complexity to the wine, which also nicely complements its hints of mango and peach. This will nicely complement our roasted chicken. Alternatively, if you do not want to have a white wine, you can opt out and have a Pinot Noir. Pinot Noirs are lighter red wines, and they pair very well with roasted chicken as they do not have the most complex flavors. This particular Pinot Noir is imported from Italy and has nice notes of dark cherries in its flavor. It's also very smooth. Now when carving the chicken, you will want to have a paring knife or a carving knife. I do not particularly have one, and a pair of kitchen shears. These are going to become very useful when separating the legs from the rest of the chicken. So you may want to go ahead and remove all of the herbs that you can. It's okay if you don't remove all of them. They've done their job. Their flavors are in the chicken, and that's the important part. So I like to start with the breast first, which is where we put the herbs. So you can go ahead and cut down the center of the chicken right here. Now next we gotta get the other breast. Now with the breast removed, it's time to remove the legs. So we're going to go ahead and flip over the chicken because this is where the leg connects to the chicken on the underside. This is where our kitchen shears will come in handy. We can do the same thing for the other side. You can also remove the wings if you'd like. They're on this side. It's in your best interest to keep this part of the chicken though, and this will become more evident in a later episode of this show. Well, now it's finally time to start eating. I'm gonna go ahead and dig in. The chicken is very moist and the mashed potatoes pair well very nicely with the chicken. And all the vegetables that we're roasting with the chicken soaked up all of the juices that the chicken let out. And now they're definitely incorporated very well into the flavor of the vegetables. And what would be a meal without a good drink? Pairs nicely. Well guys, that's how you roast a chicken. It wasn't that hard, now was it? I hope it was helpful, and thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave a comment in the comment section below. I'll be back next week with another episode of Cooking at Home Just Like Mom, where we tackle just what we can do with the leftovers of this roasted chicken. If I may suggest, please try not to throw out any of the bones or the carcass of the chicken, as they may come in handy. Until next week, I'm Julian, and bon appetit.
It was a big deal moving my big wheel to L.I. Had a backyard though, shit moved slow. Caught a cat on the rumble. What's up, kid? Got me memorizing slicks of the wild things we did. We was brick wall niggas, 6 small niggas. son, they knew it. There wasn't nobody running through it. Stepping the backyard parties was a blast. Fucking up my speakers on the wet grass. Remember getting stabbed in your ass? Your mom sat us all